This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. Welcome to another edition of Maui Causes and the Citizens Initiative co-production. My name is Sam Small. Our producer is Todd Swan. Thank you, Todd, for bringing a show together again this week. We and the community benefit from bringing issues and subjects to the public that you're really not going to find in too many other places. The media here on Maui, commercial media, is tied to commercial forces that assert their influence at all levels of our society. You're only seeing it in alternative media. I watched this week on the late night comedy shows, Ted Koppel coming on to say that, on The Daily Show, for instance, saying that those comedy shows are addressing issues and facts that the mainstream news production is not doing. The corporatized news production groups are not covering these issues with any honesty. Whereas the comedy channels, in their news coverage and using the news to lampoon and bombast people that are ridiculous in their political stances and untruthful in their political stances and harmful to our nation and our world and life in their consumer-driven private desires to control and influence our society. Here's Bernie. I wear Bernie's silhouette here. I guess it's not really a silhouette, but I'm not quite sure. It's his image. It's a caricature of Bernie Sanders, with great hope, for an alternative. Here on Maui, we call it the Rev-Love-olution. But there needs to be serious change taking place in our culture, in our society, and in our global society. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about local issues and local lifestyle with our guest, Home Lea Mahala. Thank you. Home, my apologies for destroying your name. I am not Hawaiian. I'm a New Yorker. 28 years in Manhattan.
I'll get over it.
And I know you will. And I traded Manhattan for Maui for all of the differences. And a lot of the similarities.
So you're an island guy?
I am always been an island guy. Right.
How about that?
I traded one island for another.
Nice trade-up.
I'm for the better, and I hope to bring the resources and the skills that I developed in my time in New York, bring that to bear in supporting the healthy and sustainable lifestyle here on Maui.
Thank you.
Maui drew me here, and I feel honored, to have a presence here on Maui. I'm pledged to do my best to apply my skills and my knowledge in a way that is sustainable and supportive of all the things that are so beautiful and unique, and so.
Thank you for being a part of the collective, a vital part of the collective here, because we need that. So
well,
appreciate it.
I'm joining a party already in progress. We'll get into asking you some questions about the land that you're living on and the initiative that you're involved in Haiku. That is, embodying, so many of the philosophies of the Hawaiian culture.
We call it Onipa'a Sustainability Center. And basically, our intention is to create sort of a modern, if you will, ahupua'a, a little village, with sustainable lifestyle modes in mind. Its intention is to be a vehicle for the community, sort of a walk-in museum, where you can go in and experience what a modern-day ahupua'a might look like. Therefore, we use water from the river nearby. What is excess goes back into the river, ahupua'a, Old Hawaiian style.
Right.
And we try to utilize as much of our resources locally as possible. We try to consume as little as possible. We try to depend as little on money as possible. And for me, these are not only sustainable steps, these are also sovereign steps.
Sure.
And I was once in a meeting with a whole bunch of Kanakas and a whole bunch of non-Kanakas, Malahini as well. And I posed the question, would anybody be interested in transcending money? And all my Kanaka brothers raised their hand. And all the non-Kanakas didn't for some reason, but I thought, because I had been developing ideas for how to transcend money. And it's in a book that I'm finishing soon. It's called Embracing Sovereignty. And the idea behind transcending money is to liberate ourselves. I see us as an enslaved, incarcerated people. And part of the chains and shackles of our incarceration are money and our dependence upon consumerism and materialistic goods, which are kupuna, we're not. And well, I've admired that.
And it's one of the things that makes the Hawaiian situation, we'll call it, so universal. Because the same exact issues that the Hawaiian culture and the Hawaiian people are going through here on this land is being echoed and mirrored on a global level. Because the rights of the Hawaiians are being trampled by a colonial initiative, a corporate, now originally colonial, but now it's corporate driven. And it's the same corporate initiative that are trampling the rights of entire nations, including the United States, with the TPP.
Well, the TPP is an expression of corporate mentality, which is basically something, I'm just going to go into a brief explanation.
Sure.
We live in an unsustainable societal structure right now. It's called hierarchy. Those at the top dominate and subvert those below.
Right.
So we have what some people might call the elitists up at the top. Below them is a whole bunch of bankers and CEOs. Below them is corporate CEOs and executives. Below them is politicians and warlords and generals. And then below that is all our blue and white collar workers, most of us. Okay. Below that is what I call poverty-stricken people, and you notice it's getting bigger as it goes.
Yes, sure, absolutely.
It's a pyramid.
Oh,
so I call it.
It's a really.
Well, okay.
Yeah, the pyramid used to,
it gets big.
Yeah.
So it's a pyramid of hierarchy, of domination and subversion. Okay. Below the poverty-stricken people is indigenous people, because they're even more susceptible.
Right.
And then below that is all the animals of the planet.
Right.
All living organisms besides humanity.
Right.
And below that is the earth itself.
The earth itself.
And what it is, it's a trickle-down attitude of exploitation.
Yes.
Toward everybody below.
Right.
And it's a one-way street. We're not allowed to, exploit anybody up above. There's severe penalties for that.
Right.
It's kind of like a big giant game of King of the Hill. If you remember the game King of the Hill as kids, we all vied for the domination of a little mound of dirt or gravel. Right? And the basis of the game is whoever's left standing at the top feigns triumph.
Those with the most toy wins.
And you can call it most toys. Anyway, that mentality has carried into most toys, most money, most power.
Right.
Domination.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the whole game is a fallacy. It's a farce. There is no winning when you play that kind of a game.
Yes.
Because you're left alone at the top and all your friends and buddies are down at the bottom bemoaning their defeat and with their bruises and all that.
The bank is rigged.
There's only one winner. Everybody else is a loser.
Right.
It's called the win-lose paradigm. And that's what this pyramid is built on.
Yes.
So with one person or one group of people vying for domination of the rest of the world, and just like a game of King of the Hill where the playing field, the hill, is insignificant as far as its, welfare.
Right.
It gets destroyed.
Sure.
Well, the playing field, in this case, the big game, is the planet Earth.
Right.
And its inhabitants. So the animals, the earth, indigenous people, poverty-stricken people, and us blue and white collar workers are coming up next, are getting destroyed.
Yes.
We're getting devoured in the playing of the game.
Right.
What we need to recognize eventually is that it's a house of cards. Okay? The structure is very flimsy because it's what it's based on is our belief that this is the only game in town.
Right.
That this is the only way to exist and live our lives.
That we have to be playing
as
this
we wake
game.
up, right? And as we wake up and recognize that we have the option to embrace our sovereignty,
right,
to step out of this structure of domination and subversion, and live benevolent lives, care about our neighbors, care about each other, care about ourselves. That's one thing that's been taken away from us. We barely know what self-love is, many
right.
of us in this society. But if we rebuild that, we can learn to nurture our own existence, nurture those around us, the planet. I like to say, as we learn to look around the world around us and see ourselves woven into it and smiling back, the family of humanity takes one more step forward toward peace and prosperity. Each one of us, with these motions that we make, moves the entire family of humanity profoundly forward. So to the degree that we embrace our sovereignty, step out from this dominant and subvertive structure, we start to take the foundation out from underneath it, and it will crumble. And it's going to have to crumble because the earth is dying, all the animals are going extinct. That is the foundation of this pyramid. And when that is destroyed, it will crumble. So we have a choice. We can either step out now and spare the earth and all of our fellow earthmates from decimation, from oblivion, which is also going to lead to our own oblivion. Or we step out now, spare them all, spare the earth, so we have something to hand to our mo'opuna, our coming generations. And that's what every organism, including all of our kupuna, our elders, and since the beginning of life on earth, has strived to do, is provide a better future for the coming generations. And that's something that this generation, at least this structure of society, has lost.
Right.
So we need to get back in the game of symbiosis, taking care of each other, taking care of ourselves, and taking care of the planet for the future generations.
Right.
And that's how the whole thing crumbles.
And it is a progression that we are on. It seems to be getting faster and faster. The issues are getting more and more pressing.
I am seeing a lot of hope for optimism. There are people all over the planet that are putting the pieces together of stepping back into integrity with the planet, integrity with our fellow earthmates, integrity with each other. I consider that to be one of the highest true values. Money is virtual value.
Yes.
Okay? It's like monopoly money. It really means nothing more than the value we give it. Okay? If we recognize that it's just pieces of paper and we can stop playing that game, there's other forms of currency, there's other economic systems we can partake of to support each other and to thrive as a community, then it'll be easy to let go of that.
It's an uphill battle. I have to say, the powers that be, the forces that are in place, are very effective at what they do. And there's, it's very challenging to convince someone whose livelihood is embedded into a particular system to abandon that system. There's a lot of fear on the part of people who are embedded in the system. They don't want to see it go away. They don't understand the change that is available to them. And so we, for instance, in the GM moratorium movement here on Maui this last year, in creating this law that would temporarily suspend genetically modified crop production and experimentation on Maui and its attached pesticide experimentation. We ran into a lot of resistance from people who were very dedicated, unreasonably dedicated, to perpetuating chemical monocropping, and saw any opposition or any challenge to that chemical monocropping as a great threat and to be vilified. And it's the work that you're doing on the land with your, creating an opportunity for people to experience a completely different paradigm is a big part of the answer, because it gives people an opportunity to experience what life can be like without the dependency on chemical monocropping, and that is a great crack in the door for people to understand it on all levels. How it affects them on a daily basis is the food that they choose to eat. And given that opportunity to educate and for people to have an understanding of the alternatives that truly do exist, can be a crack in the door so that they have an understanding of the entire game that you portrayed.
If I was a knight going out to kill a dragon, would it be in my best interest to feed that dragon voraciously? I don't think so.
Right.
I think it would be kind of self-defeating.
Right.
Well, I think what needs to happen in our society, and maybe Maui in particular, especially with the GMO initiative, is that our choices, and you say food choices, I'm glad you bring that up, actually are feeding the dragon.
Sure.
We want to create legislation, and we want to, put a stop to GMO development on Maui, and that's all very great. But in some way, if we step back far enough to see the bigger picture, we will recognize that we're actually asking somebody else to solve the problems that we are creating. Okay? If we are buying GMO foods, and of course we're encouraging people not to buy GMO foods, but if we do, then we are feeding the dragon. Okay?
Right.
What a lot of people don't realize is that a big part of some of our diets, which happens to be eating meat and dairy, is subsidized by the government sevenfold.
Right.
$7 for every dollar we spend. In other words, for every dollar that I go out and buy myself a Big Mac or a bento plate, things like that, $7 is added to that to support animal agribusiness.
Of public money.
Of public money. That's right. It's taxpayer money. Yep. Now, if we look at the pharmacy companies, okay, they're producing the pesticides, herbicides, and such.
Right.
They're producing the seeds that go into the fields that grow the food.
Yep.
I don't know if people know this, but 90% of the soy and 85% of the corn that are grown in the U.S. go to feed livestock.
Right.
That's a lot.
Yep.
That's a lot. So that's a lot of seed, and that's a lot of herbicides and pesticides.
And the same corporations then also manufacture the pharmaceuticals which they offer to treat people for the illnesses that they get by being exposed to the chemicals and the pesticides.
And they're not treatments. They're pacifiers.
They're Band-Aids.
Right.
Right.
They don't cure anything.
Right.
They pacify you for the moment.
That's right.
Also, they produce the growth hormones that are fed to the animals and the antibiotics that are fed to the animals and things like that. So they're raking it in. A lot of those profits, a lot of that
stuff.
A lot of those subsidies go to the pharmacy companies that we're trying to fight.
Yep.
So part of what I want to help make clear is that our lifestyle is helping to support a lot of the demons that we would like to extinguish. So what is going to become important and I believe critical soon is that we all start to reevaluate our lifestyles.
Right.
And unfortunately, because I know this is very personal for a lot of people, our food choices.
Right.
The planet is dying. The biggest deforester of the planet is animal agriculture, 1 acre per second. In other words, in 1 minute, we just lost 60 seconds of this last conversation. We lost 60 acres of pristine rainforest or conifer forest somewhere in the world. And rainforest doesn't have a lot of topsoil.
No.
So it's only good for grazing for 5-10 years tops.
Right.
That's it. And then it's wasteland. We have turned 1/3 of the Earth's surface into desert. Desertification is now becoming one of our concerns.
And the runoff then pollutes the waters.
And the oceans are becoming dead
as well.
We have dead zones now. We have one in the Gulf of Mexico that's 8,000 square miles where nothing lives because it's so contaminated.
Right.
On and on. I could go on about all the devastation, including global warming. The amount of contributors to global warming is 4 times that of all the transportation in the world, cars, trucks, trains, planes, and automobiles. And if you add up all the greenhouse gas emissions from all those and compare that to the greenhouse gas emissions and contributions of animal agriculture is 4 times more.
Right.
13% on transportation, 51% on animal agriculture. 4 times bigger. So we would do more to help curb global warming by not eating one hamburger, than by not driving our car for 25 days. So there's a little contrast for us. So it's just something to keep in mind.
That's an extreme number.
Yeah, you could stop driving your car for 24 days or not eat a hamburger, and you'd have the same contribution to ending global warming, or at least stopping it.
Right. And that's a great way to put it. And I hope people at home take a moment to understand the magnitude of what Home just said, because it really does bring it into some focus for people.
Well, that's one aspect of the whole sustainability picture, and I've got lots of facts and figures. I could go on about that, but for me, what's important that I would like to convey to my community is the importance of sovereignty. And sovereignty, when I speak about sovereignty, I'm not talking about what a lot of people think of as we're going to become a sovereign nation and we're going to sign up for citizenship and all that kind of stuff. That's great. I think that's wonderful. But I'm talking about something that actually, in my opinion, transcends that. And that is spiritual sovereignty. I remember John Case came here to Maui to help out with the reinstated nation of Hawaii. And something that he stated was struck me deeply was that a group of people do not need to ask permission of any occupying state to become sovereign. They merely need to proclaim their sovereignty.
Right. And nor should they ever expect another group to recognize them. It's not something that anyone is ever going to give you. It's something that you need to establish and simply create for yourself. And people are taught in our society very often to have no expectation of that they have no right on that level. And that is, that goes to the peak of the argument.
Exactly. We've been indoctrinated into a hierarchy system, a structural system of domination and subversion. We were brought up in it. So we expect to ask permission of somebody higher up. So that same principle we're talking about for a body of people or a nation that would like to proclaim its sovereignty applies to individuals. Any one of us at any time we like can proclaim our sovereignty. And we don't even have to say it. We just have to live it. We just have to step into it and say, I will no longer subvert or exploit or dominate anybody else. And by the same token, I now liberate myself from any obligations that I may have assumed to be dominated or exploited. I choose to be a sovereign being. I will live for the benefit of my community and of my society and of my fellow earthmates. When we do that, we start to take out the little cards that are holding up this pyramid structure. And it starts to weaken, and when enough of us have done it, it will crumble.
There's more to our show in just a moment. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. We do see greater and greater numbers of people participating in a conscious way. I do a lot of educational work in video production in support of a lot of different initiatives, and consciousness is a growing feature in the world population. Thankfully so. It's still a minority, but there is more and more work being done and educational opportunities, experiential opportunities in place, so that people can have that awakening and that opening.
I'd like to share something on that note,
please,
if I may. The curve of social change throughout history has always taken a very similar chart. Scale.
Trajectory.
Basically, trajectory. Okay, I like that. Thank you.
Sure.
Basically, it starts very imperceptible. It looks like the same old thing, but consciousness is being spread. People are changing. And if you look at it over a long period of time, it looks like a very long, slow up-ramp. But at one point, it begins this up-ramp. And shortly after that, it basically explodes. So it's a curve that goes bam, like that. This consciousness that I'm talking about, that I call sovereignty, I believe is at that moment of up-ramp right now. We've been on this very long slope. People have been talking to each other. And part of the reason I believe we are on the verge of this explosion of consciousness is the internet.
Yes,
absolutely. Because people are learning the power of the internet, even though a lot of the venues on the internet are controlled. They're corporately controlled. We're still learning how to use it. And the consciousness is getting so big that we recognize they can't control us. Even though we're playing with their toys and things like that. And they want to manipulate us and try to control the information that we send around and all that. And
there's growing initiatives to assert control over the internet. Just as we have the TPP, we have issues over net neutrality. And it's a corporate-backed initiative to create a hierarchy on the web so that they can charge a higher amount of money for faster throughput. If you get more and faster bandwidth, you have to pay a higher price to do that. And people who can't pay a higher price are excluded from that level of communication. And it is an effort to make more money and to control the dialogue. So it's another one of these whole stack of issues that are driving that curve to be steeper and steeper.
Yeah, I think as we recognize the corruption in our society, which is becoming easier and easier to notice, I think it's unmistakable for even most of the people in our society. If
yes, hopefully so. I mean, if they see what's going on with the Republican, candidate debates, and see the coverage, I'm guessing you don't watch television.
No, all my information comes to me through the internet. I get what's most important to me.
Right, and you get feedback that what's going on television is completely out of balance. I'm sure you've heard.
Well, it's manipulated.
Yes.
Yeah, and distorted. So with all this great communication going on, with this awakening of consciousness, I see that people are recognizing the need for sovereignty at this time in history.
Right.
And that's exciting to me.
It is.
And that's why I want to help encourage it. I started off earlier today with a metaphor of a captain on a boat, and we're all captains of a boat. And there are people out in the world who are up in the crow's nest for us, and they're up on the bow, and they're watching out for hazards and things like that. And I consider myself to be one of them. And I see that, we're heading for something here. The planet is dying, and there's a way out. If we turn hard to port, as a metaphor, which might be toward our sovereignty, then we stand a good chance of bypassing this potential calamity, which I look very much forward to, for the sake of my kids and my mo'opuna. We can do that as we tune in more. I mean, one of the most powerful tools, including the internet, is public TV.
Sure.
We have the opportunity to present information to our community that is from the community, by the community, for the community, just as the Founding Fathers of America had intended. Well, that's powerful.
It is.
And they recognize that power. That's why they wrote that into the Constitution. It was a beautiful idea.
And the powers that be recognize that power as well, because they're continually trying to destroy Akaku, the very station that we're hosted by here.
Right. Well, they're suffering from an affliction. It's called King of the Hill syndrome.
Right.
That's what I call it.
Right.
And it's an illness.
Right.
Because there is no winning. When you're left standing at the top of the pyramid, or if you're left standing at the top of a pyramid of a completely destroyed planet, really, what have you got left? I mean, they might think that, okay, we're building big tunnels underground and we're going to go live in an underground city while, all this radioactivity or whatever it is that's going to go on, settles, and then they can come back.
Well, they are doing that.
I know. I know, and it's silly. It's folly.
Right. Who would want to live in that world, in that post-apocalyptic world?
If you take a look at how beautiful our planet is right now, all these beautiful life forms that inhabit this and share this place with us, of the beautiful sunset that we get thanks to the atmosphere that's so far still intact,
right?
It's paradise. It's absolutely gorgeous, and we are fortunate to have this opportunity to be present at this moment in time. To me, this is a very exciting moment in history.
It is.
There is no other time in all of history where our decisions, our thinking, and our actions have mattered so critically to what the fate of the future generations is going to be. Right. So we are lucky to be here right now. And I'm hoping there's people out there that are hearing this that are going to feel moved to make a difference, find some of this stuff applicable for their lives, and start getting tuned in. Pick up the magazines. We have this beautiful one, Living Aloha, that I highly recommend. We have the internet. We have Akaku. Tune into Akaku. We have local newspapers, and of course there's lots of active people, and there's internet sites and things we can all tune into. So I would look forward to that. I would encourage it, and if anybody would like support, that's part of what we're here for.
Your educational organization is itself a not-for-profit organization?
We have established a 501c3, not-for-profit educational and spiritual organization.
And how can people reach out on the internet to find more
You can find us at ola-life.org. OLA-LIFE.org. O-R-G. And
people will find on your website descriptions of the educational programs that you offer?
They'll find a little bit about us, yeah. We had a very elaborate website which crashed, I'm sorry to say.
It happens?
Yeah, it does happen. So we're rebuilding it, and they'll find whatever's there presently, and we're going to keep building it back up. But they can figure out how to find us, how to get a hold of us. There's email addresses there.
Right.
So yes, you are welcome to call us or email us, and we would look forward to starting a conversation with anybody out there that wants to learn more about embracing your sovereignty, embracing modes of sustainability, or just helping us all move this forward so we can have a better world for the future generations.
Well, and one of the things that is most effective in creating the mindset that we're talking about is a direct experience. And coming forward, creating an opportunity for people to come to a place and establish residency and live a lifestyle that is in balance and in a sustainable model, and to be able to do that on Maui. That's the ideal that we want to see the entire valley, here as a model for sustainable agriculture and sustainable living. And it's doable. It's an opportunity, as HCNS comes to the end of its reign, controlling the land that they've been controlling and controlling the water, and seemingly, hopefully, forced Hopefully they do it willing, but forced into change. They're claiming now the climate may force them to diversify. Never, I think, would they acknowledge that community pressure is also forcing them to diversify. Because that would be bowing to an authority that they refuse to acknowledge even exists, or even to say that the model of agriculture that they've been pursuing all these years is flawed, and in itself is not sustainable. They're blaming it on the weather. But whatever they want to blame it on is fine as long as they change. And creating the kind of diverse, sustainable agricultural model for the rest of the world to see here on Maui is a fabulous thing. You guys are doing it, in your way and on 20 acres. And we do have the opportunity to expand that and create even a larger model here on Maui.
Ideally so. Yeah, I consider our little project to be a little seed. Yeah. And hopefully it'll sprout and grow and create more seeds, and we'll get to germinate all throughout the islands and all throughout, hopefully, the world. But I figured it's got to start somewhere, and it was a vision my wife and I held many years ago, and it remains passionate in our hearts to this day. So we're happy to be doing it. It's very gratifying to see the community responding to the work that we're doing, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of those coming up soon.
Well, and you recently wrote an article for the Living Aloha magazine, and that brought focus to Mauna Kea, and the efforts of the community to take issue with the construction of the TMT telescope. Speak on that. Why is that meaningful?
Well, for me, it's just one more version of a lot of the struggles that we're having throughout the world today in terms of having our cultures, our communities, our societies, and our earth being trampled. There's a reason that mountains are sacred. Similar to rivers and waterfalls and oceans and specific fish and organisms, indigenous cultures throughout the planet have deified mountains, landscapes, land features, and the animals around them. Why? Because they're important. They're important to our welfare. We are connected to them. I love Chief Seattle's quote, all things are connected. As we burden the world around us, including our fellow Earthmates, we burden ourselves and, more importantly, our coming generations, our mo'opuna. Mauna Kea may look like a big giant rock sticking up out of the ocean to some people. And that's their perspective, unfortunately. I think it's a big statement that people in the world are no longer standing up for so-called development or progress in the name of sanctified region decimation. In other words, our mountains are being desecrated along with the rest of the planet. Right. I think the fact that these people are standing up and, there's so many people in the world that have a naive perspective that say, what's the big deal? It's just a big cement slab on the top of this humongous mountain. The mountain's hardly even going to notice it. That's not the point. The point is, we'll notice it. It's like saying to somebody who's quit smoking, hey, if you want to have a drag, go ahead. Nobody's watching. I'm watching. This isn't just for me. I'm not taking care of my health just for me. I'm taking care of my health for my kids, my family. Right. I'm going to be a much better steward. I'm going to be a much better example, and I'm going to be a much healthier and more loving person if I take care of this beautiful sanctified vessel. Well, our mountains are our vessels. The waters that come off the mountains feed all the fields down below. They bring nurturing soils down below. There's so many things I could talk about, but it's the same thing with the Native American lands that are being desecrated right now. It's the same thing with the Amazon that's being severely desecrated right now. The people are protesting throughout the world. It's the same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement that is being desecrated. Black people came and they served this country in so many ways. Empires, including the United States of America, was built on the backs of slaves.
Yes.
Every empire. We're no different. We have them to thank. And I don't like putting them in a category. For me personally, they're my brothers, period. They got darker skin, I have lighter skin, you have lighter skin than me.
Doesn't matter.
That's all BS, if you ask me.
Yep.
It's just another way of keeping us in these categories. We all matter, including the planet, including our bioregions, the mountains and the waterfalls and things like that.
Well, and that's core to an understanding of sustainability, is that all things are connected.
Indeed.
In ways that are subtle and profane. And it's any work that helps to crack that understanding open for people is worthy of support.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad I wrote it.
Yeah.
Well, there are those who would argue that this is about progress. This is about understanding, what's happening up in the heavens and the stars and things like that. We'll see deeper into the cosmos, and that has merit. But when we assume that the gains that this telescope will bring us, especially if for a specific number of people that are involved in this project, monetary gains are what they have to garner off of it.
Right.
And what's going to be left is this big giant cement slab that's going to be there for hundreds, if not thousands of years on a very sacred spot.
And not functional after more than a couple of hundred. If
At
even.
most, a couple hundred at most.
Yeah, any new construction that they do these days is only intended to last 70 to 100 years.
Right. So that's the definition of a vice.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to go into something very quickly here for our viewers, if I may.
But before you do, I just
Yeah.
want to add the additional point to say that the particular science that telescope is designed to achieve, the scientific understandings that they hope to garner through the application of this telescope, have been described by the leaders of the initiative as discretionary. They don't need the science that will come from this telescope. It's not going to change anything fundamental to the way that we're living and the things that are going on. There's no new technology that they expect to be able to garner from it. It's just going to answer questions that they have and that they've corralled the money to be able to answer. So it ties in and acknowledges that it's a project that is a plum. It's a feather in the cap of educators who have access to money.
Yeah, regardless of what merits they say the telescope is going to provide us with, because I don't see it providing us anything in terms of feeding the populations or creating a better future.
No, nothing of that.
It's more just like, okay, so what are those stars up there? And I think that's all great stuff, but you know what? Our planet has somewhere around 30 billion more years, so scientists tell us, left in its lifespan. I think we got a little more time. There's no rush to build more telescopes and things like that. I think our biggest priority right now is how to start nurturing the planet and each other, because we failed at that. We're obviously failing at that. So we need to put our attention back where it belongs, on being a high integrity species on the planet. So getting back to habits, if I may.
Yeah, you want to.
I like to, and I think this will be helpful for the community, which is why I want to include this.
Please.
If I may. I define habits as being discernible into 4 different categories. There's the virtue. Virtue is easy to define. It's good for me now, provides benefits, and it continues to be good for me in the foreseeable future. Okay? Worth keeping around. Patience is a virtue. You've heard that one. So that's a good one to hang on to. Okay? Then there's the crutch. A crutch is something that we use temporarily to help us get from point A to point B. So it has its merit, but at some point we have to prepare ourselves to relinquish it, to let it go. Okay, if you break your leg and you're using an actual crutch, once your leg heals up, get rid of the crutch.
Right.
It gets a little awkward moving around otherwise, right? So that's a crutch. A vice is a habit that is beneficial momentarily, short term, but in the long term, it's detrimental. It's harmful for our welfare. Okay? One example of a vice could be a crutch that has been clung to for too long.
Right. Becoming addicted to it.
Right. So when we first started using the vice, like for some people, it's nice to have a drink every now and then to kind of calm their nerves and things like that. But if we forget that it's a crutch, just to get us, to another point, it becomes a vice.
And some crutches are more addictive.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot that we don't recognize that as vices. An addiction is the last habit. And an addiction is something that we recognize as being harmful, and we still do it.
Right.
Because that immediate reward, in the moment anyway, is more important.
Right.
And that's when we become very harmful, not only to ourselves, but to our families and our community and the world around us.
Right.
So part of what I suggest for all of us is to take a look at our habits and see if we can identify what's a virtue. If we have lots of virtues, most of our habits are virtues, but we have a few little crutches, things that we rely on that maybe we don't need to rely on. And I think we need to ask ourselves, is it okay? Can I let this go now? Have I been hanging on to it for too long? And if we find that there's a vice in there that maybe we've relied on a little too long, maybe it's good to get to work on relinquishing that. And then, of course, eventually we're going to get to the rough stuff. And there's support in our community for helping us. Anyway, as I see it, our steps towards sovereignty might involve a little, metaphorically, 12-step intervention or some kind of mechanism to help us transcend our, what I would call, harmful habits. But if we put it in perspective where we can see those 4 different habits clearly, then we can more easily define the kind of behavior that we're accustomed to and say, is that serving my mo'opuna, my future generations? If it's not, then maybe it's time for me to take responsibility, grab my sovereignty, and relinquish it.
Okay.
I hope we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Mauna Kea as a metaphor, for all of that, for at the apex of understanding of personal sovereignty, is wonderful. A cultural, sovereignty. It spreads down in all directions. Our with the 4 levels that you describe, there's a group of people that live outside that structure. The estimate is in our society that there are 3 to 6% of the people are true sociopaths. And they go beyond all of those measures because they live a life where they have no real discernment between right or wrong. They're incapable of that. They have no discernment of empathy for other people because their brains don't give them a place to do that.
Is there a specific group of people we're referring to here?
Well, population numbers, it gets down to that. Population numbers here in the United States, 3 to 6%, you do the math, that's like 14 million people are estimated to be true sociopaths. They don't know the difference between right or wrong. They do believe every lie that comes out of their mouth. They speak it as if it were true when it is fundamentally a lie. And those people seem to gravitate to positions of power as CEOs, as politicians, and perhaps now they're suggesting even as police or military. And so we are up against a a force, powers that be, that are driven by people who really don't know any better. And, certainly feel for them. But just as you've described, our personal sovereignty need not be predicated on their illness.
Thank you for including that. Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me, my perspective, or the way I would frame it, is what you're describing is King of the Hill syndrome.
Yes. People
who are stuck in this whole notion that he who stands at the top of the hill while everybody else bemoans their defeat is the winner.
Right.
Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, they were encouraged and rewarded for doing that, and they still consider it to be the name of the game, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so, the work that you do with your community is creating an alternative.
The contrast I would call the win-win paradigm, where nobody wins until we all win.
Right.
So, as we see that another's triumph is our own triumph. And when I say triumph, I don't mean, winning more money or making more money or, getting a bigger car or anything like that. What I mean by winning is transcending addictions, vices, and crutches. That's winning.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the pathway to sovereignty.
Superb. Thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of the co-production of Maui Causes and the Citizens Initiative. I'm Sam Small. Todd Swan's in the control room. Thank you, Todd, for bringing this all together today for us all. And join us again next week for another lively discussion on topics and issues that you're not likely to see in other places here in Maui County. Take a look if you get a chance. Drop in on MauiCauses.org. Maui Causes, a citizens initiative to create media for Maui's environmental, progressive causes, and we offer you an opportunity, actually, to even underwrite this show. We currently don't have a sponsor, but we need one. And perhaps that's you or your company. If you feel in alignment with some of the things that we've expressed here, even here on this program on Akaku, you can benefit from a mention. Just as public television can have a corporate sponsor, so can programs like this. You'd have a 30-second mention at the beginning, at the end of the show, and other opportunities to get your name out there in the public, aligned with these issues, so that people know where you stand and your company stands and can support you. You support us, we'll support you. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you again. Aloha. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.